What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Josh. This is Overlanding Now, and as you can see, much to many people's dismay, we have a Subaru Outback Wilderness that has taken the place of our 2020 Jeep Rubicon. Some may ask why, and that's a really good question. I'm going to answer those questions and a lot more in this video to explain to you why we thought the Outback Wilderness was the best off-road vehicle for us as a family. And more importantly, before we get into the video, I want you to comment right now your knee-jerk reaction to this vehicle sitting in our garage, because of all the Jeeps that we've had and everything we've done has been related to our Jeep. This is something different. What is your knee-jerk reaction? Put that in the comments. Stay tuned. All right, so let's talk about a couple of things, because initially you might be thinking that you got rid of all your Jeeps. You don't have any Jeeps. No, we still have our Jeep Gladiator. And if you guys have been watching for any length of time, you know that the Jeep Gladiator has kind of taken over the channel in terms of our adventures and our travels. So my wife's Jeep really just sat in the garage. She drove it as a daily driver, but it never got used for what it was intended to be used for. And the problem with that is the Jeep isn't that comfortable to drive. You have to have a love for the vehicle and a love for the lifestyle in order to drive a Jeep every single day. That being said, our Gladiator is our pretty much full-time, all-purpose mission vehicle. That's what I like to refer to it as. And it sits in the garage and I drive my truck on a daily, so it's not that I have to drive that thing every single day. But we have more needs than what that other Jeep, the Jeep Wrangler, could really offer us. And the Gladiator is going to be the primary vehicle for all of our adventures. That said, this vehicle will be incorporated into our adventures, hopefully on a pretty regular basis. There's a lot of good stuff about this vehicle. I have watched countless hours of YouTube, just like you guys probably have. And for our family, if we're just talking about the realistic aspect of having a vehicle that meets all of your needs, I don't think there is one. I'll just say that right out of the gate so we can get it out of the way. The Jeep Gladiator that we have, I love that thing. I will never get rid of it unless they come out with a Hemi. Then I would probably have to get rid of it. But for everyday use, and to be realistic, 90%, 85% of your overland, or I should say our overland travels, do not consist of hardcore off-roading. It's a lot of Forest Service roads, it's a lot of gravel roads, and unless we are going to a specific place for a specific purpose to do serious off-roading, 90% of everything that we do can be done in a Subaru Outback Wilderness. Now, all that being said, it does hurt to have to walk away from the Jeep, because that is what brought us here. That is what our family has gone on tons of adventures in, and it was a hard decision to make. My wife was going to be in the video, but our daughter is not cooperating today. So I'm going to talk about what we have, what we plan to do, give you some specs and the reasons we made this decision, because there's a lot of technical information that I think we should share with you guys. So in the event that you want to make a decision to get into something that is completely different like this, which is a little bit frightening and overwhelming, maybe it'll help you make that decision a little bit easier. Okay, so based on some of your guys' comments on the last video, when I was comparing the Gladiator and the Wrangler, I asked you what you thought that would be in my garage, or what you thought that we were going to be getting. And not a single person guessed the Subaru Outback Wilderness. Now, yes, it is much different than a Jeep, rightfully so. Is it as capable as a Jeep? Absolutely not. Is it more economical than a Jeep? Yes. But the reason we decided to get rid of my wife's Wrangler is because we have the Gladiator. The Gladiator will always be our primary mission vehicle. It will be the vehicle that we take predominantly when we go on trips. But there will be several trips, one that's coming up pretty soon, that we are going to take the Subaru on, because the Subaru is very capable. And when I was thinking about, yes, don't get me wrong, I've thought about a Bronco, but their whole situation is a disaster. I've always loved the 4Runners, but I didn't want to get another SUV. Well, even though this is considered an SUV, I didn't want to get an SUV, and my wife didn't really like that vehicle too much. And I'm going to be honest with you, she hated this thing when I was all jacked up talking about we should get a Wilderness. She wanted nothing to do with it. But through heavy convincing, I was able to paint this beautiful picture as to why this vehicle is a good travel vehicle for the family. The interior space in the back seat is much bigger than the Jeep. The seats in general are much more comfortable. The drive is much more comfortable. As you know, Jeeps are not inherently comfortable vehicles to drive. You have to really love the lifestyle in order to appreciate a Jeep at all. So that said, the Gladiator is not going anywhere. There was really no need to have two Jeeps. Something that's more economical, something that gets better gas mileage, something that's more comfortable to drive, and something that can accommodate our family on cross-country trips with a little bit more comfort was pretty important. So those are some of the reasons why we decided to go with the Subaru Outback Wilderness. Now there's a bunch of other reasons which I'm going to get into, and I think this will paint a different picture, and it may give you a little bit more to think about. Not that you're going to trade your Jeep for a Wilderness. I would never get rid of the Gladiator for this and not have a Jeep and just have this. That would never happen. But because we had two Jeeps, this was a possibility. Now, first things first, let's talk about the ground clearance issue. The Subaru Outback Wilderness is lifted 1 inch from the factory, so it has 9.5 inches of ground clearance. Comparing that to my wife's Wrangler, it has 10.8 inches of ground clearance. Now, that's 1.3 inches bigger. That's not 1.3 inches bigger. That's 1 foot and 3 inches bigger. But the point being is this is still a very large amount of ground clearance when you're talking about the types of roads that we're typically on. You don't always find yourself in a big rock crawl situation. And if you are headed down that road, you typically know what's coming. Now, granted, if you're out in Moab or you are kind of searching those types of circumstances out, then this is not going to be a vehicle that is suitable for those type of adventures. But at 9.5 inches of ground clearance, absolutely factory, you have a lot more than what most people really will ever need. Now, if we're talking about interior storage space, that was something that I had to take into consideration, and I really had to think about, because with the Wrangler, we had 31 cubic feet of interior storage, which isn't a ton, but it's a fair amount. You can pack a lot of stuff in there if you get creative. Now, I needed something that had, at bare minimum, at least that amount of interior storage space. And this vehicle does. It has just slightly more at 32.5 cubic feet of interior storage space. So that was one thing that when I started doing the comparisons and thinking about what it is that we need versus what we don't need, making sure that we had enough interior storage was absolutely important, because when you have a family of 4 and you need to travel across the country, there's a lot of things that you have to bring with you. I'm not going to explain that to you. But the point being, this vehicle does check the box in terms of interior storage space for our travels. Another big factor that I think everyone takes this into consideration is the price of the two vehicles. Now, this Outback Wilderness, off the lot, brand new, $41,500. The same exact Jeep that we have, was online last night looking, brand new, is roughly, depending upon your options, and if you get heated seats and heated steering wheel, you are paying roughly $55,000 to $60,000 for that vehicle. Now, granted, I am not saying that $55,000 or $60,000 is too much, because I've paid it twice for 2 different Jeeps, and I loved those vehicles. I love my Gladiator currently. I love the JL when we had it. But if you just think economically, this vehicle is nearly $20,000. We'll call it 15, so we're not arguing about it. $15,000 cheaper with all the options that you can get from Subaru. So in terms of your monthly payment and the economic side of it, it's a lot cheaper and it's more suitable and it's more achievable for a large majority of the population. So I'm not gonna lie to you, it is nice having a much cheaper car payment on this than we did on the Jeep, because now with the Gladiator, there's no point for us to carry 2 car payments with 2 different Jeeps. So that right there, from the price standpoint, it is much cheaper to own a Wilderness, and quite honestly, you might actually get more out of it. So another thing that I didn't really put too much thought into, but it's when you start talking about going off-road and you start talking about tight switchbacks, you got to look at the length of your vehicle. Now, the length of the Wilderness is 191 inches. The length of the Wrangler is 188 inches. So you're only giving up 3 inches. Well, gaining 3 inches if you're going this direction. But 3 inches is not much. When you see the Subaru Outback WIlderness and you see a Jeep JL driving down the street, this looks longer, like significantly longer. It looks more boatish, if you want to call it that. And it's not. It's only 3 inches in difference. So that was another thing that when we were looking and comparing, I wanted to know the difference in those lengths, because those lengths don't just affect how long the vehicle is, it also plays a bunch of other roles in its off-road capability and its potential performance. So when you take the length of the vehicles into consideration, it makes a really big difference on 3 separate areas: the approach angle, the breakover angle, and the departure angle. And I knew getting into the Wilderness, I was going to have a much different approach and departure angle than what I had in the Wrangler. Now, the Wilderness has a 20-degree approach angle, okay, where the Wrangler has a 43.9. So that is a 20-degree difference in what I can go over or what I'm going to hit in front of the vehicle before I start to traverse any type of crazy obstacles or difficult terrain. Now, the breakover is 21.2 in the Wilderness and 22.6 in the Wrangler. So we're not really that far off there in terms of the breakover angle, which, you know, I was actually quite surprised about. Now, the departure angle, 23.6 for the Wilderness and 37 for the Wrangler. So that said, it is a big deal when you're talking about any type of rock crawling, any waterfalls, rock faces that you got to go up. But like I said, for me, this vehicle is not intended to do those things. That's not why I got the vehicle. We got the vehicle for much different reasons. We have the Jeep Gladiator that can do all of that stuff. And when we want to do that stuff, we have the vehicle to do it. But this is something that was completely different, that I absolutely love the looks of it. And I think this is going to be, once I'm done, an awesome adventure vehicle. So another thing that I want to talk about is the towing capacity of the Jeep Wrangler and the Subaru Outback WIlderness. The Outback WIlderness has a towing capacity that's the exact same of the Jeep Wrangler. They're both 3,500 pounds, which is a lot for this vehicle. Now, everyone knows, if you've watched this channel for any amount of time, I'm a huge stickler about towing because I believe that it's important to present factual information to people, because when you load this down, or you load any vehicle down with its max towing capacity, it is going to create a lot of pressure, a lot of strain on your tires, on your suspension, on your drivetrain. Everything is stressed a lot more if you max out your towing. So that being said, I'll never tow 3,500 pounds with this. I also would probably never tow 3,500 pounds with the Jeep JL, but I have the ability to tow the same amount of weight comfortably in these vehicles. Now, what I can foresee is possibly a small teardrop trailer. They're about 1,500, 2,000 pounds when they're completely loaded out. And I think that puts you within a safe limit to still do the things that you want to do without putting too much stress on the vehicle. So having the same exact towing capacity in both vehicles was actually a win. So another thing I want to talk about is the weight of the vehicles, because as we build these rigs for any type of adventure, we know we put a lot of stuff in them. So I was curious to know the difference in the weight. Now, the weight of the Wilderness is 3,896 pounds as it rolls off the lot from the dealership. And the Wrangler's weight is 4,222 pounds. So we're only about a 400-pound difference in weight. Not that that makes a whole lot of difference, but it's good information to know. It's something that I wanted to know when I was doing my research. How much does this vehicle weigh versus the JL, and what am I looking at in terms of GVWR? So that brings me to GVWR. What is the gross vehicle weight rating for these two vehicles? Now, the Wrangler has a GVWR of 5,350 pounds, and the Wilderness has a GVWR of 5,026 pounds. So you get about 1,400 additional pounds of weight that can be added to this vehicle safely per the factory. In the JL, you only get 1,000 pounds roughly of acceptable safe weight if you're loading it down with a bunch of overland gear like we're gonna do with this and like most people do with their JLs. So you actually get more weight that you can put in this safely. We all know that most people weigh down their vehicles way more than what is safely recommended. That's not the conversation we're having. It's just interesting to know that this can actually handle more weight per the factory specifications. So the big one for me, and this is probably a big one for anyone, is gas mileage. The gas mileage that is displayed from the factory of the Jeep is just wrong. I think it's 21 city, 26 highway. I never got either of those two in either of my Jeeps before I did any type of work to them whatsoever. So that is pretty much false. Now, the Wilderness is said to receive 22 in the city and 26 on the highway. We have had this for over a week, and we have driven about 700 miles. Right now, the odometer reads 23.8 miles per gallon. That is both highway and city. That's a big deal. They both have roughly the same fuel tank. I think this has a 16, and I'm fairly certain that the Jeep JL has either 16 or 17 as well. I don't know, don't quote me on that. But the tank size is the same, and this can go much greater distances, which means it's going to be much cheaper to travel in this vehicle than it would be in a Jeep JL or a Gladiator or something similar. So when we were making that decision and we were talking about the economics, once again, not only is it significantly cheaper to purchase this vehicle, granted, I do not get all of the same capabilities, and I understand that, but like I said before, we still have the Gladiator, so I'm not concerned with that. But economically, to be able to get 23.8 miles to the gallon is absolutely incredible. Now, I know that's going to change once we put bigger tires on it, once we have a tent on it, once we have our refrigerator in the back. I understand all of that's gonna change, but I never got anywhere close to the factory gas mileage rating in either of my Jeeps before doing any work to them. And then obviously once we put bigger tires and did all of that, it was even worse. Once again, I didn't buy a Jeep for gas mileage. I understand, and I did understand at the time what I'm getting into when purchasing it, but this gives us a longer vehicle range. What we sacrifice in off-road capability, we gain in on-road function, gas mileage, and still having the opportunity to go to 90% of the places that I want to go. So if you look at it like that, I've talked before about the Jeeps in general, where you are sacrificing a lot of on-road stuff to have a lot of off-road capability. And this is the exact opposite. I get a lot more on the road and a lot more fuel efficient, and economically, this is a smarter vehicle to purchase. But that's really, everyone has to make their own decision, but having a yin and a yang is going to give us a really cool perspective on this Wilderness and if it was the right purchase. All right, guys, that's it. That's this 2022 Subaru Outback Wilderness that we purchased. Now, I have a whole stack of parts sitting right there. And this entire weekend, we are going to spend, me and my wife, out here turning wrenches to get this thing more suitable for our lifestyle. 9.5 inches of ground clearance is great, but when you're used to 12, 13, and 14, she needs to come up a little bit. So we have a lot of really cool stuff sitting right there that I cannot wait to tear into, but I had to get this video done first before I started tearing this thing apart. So the next few videos on this vehicle will be all the transformations that have been done. There's a lot of really cool ways that I've come up with that I'm going to mount my compressor, because this is going to be another complete, fully functional mission vehicle. Will it be as capable? No. Is it still going to be something that we take on a lot of family adventures and we go across the United States in and we camp out of and we live out of? Absolutely. And I'm going to show you guys that. I know a lot of you have subscribed for Jeep content. That's not going anywhere. But the reality is we wanted something that's more efficient and more economical. This was the best thing that we could come up with. I've had my eyes on this for a long time. I love driving it. It's comfortable, it's quiet, it's soothing, all the things the Jeep are not, and all the reasons I love the Jeep are the fact that it's not that comfortable and it's not quiet, but I can drive up the side of a mountain. So if you guys enjoyed the video, I would really appreciate it if you liked it. It would be super helpful for the channel. Leave a comment after you've heard all of this. Do you think I made a bad decision? Is this something you would consider for your family? I'd love to hear everybody's take on this, because this was a big leap for us to walk away from a Jeep to get something that I've never owned a Subaru, but I'm really excited to show you guys what this thing can do and what we're going to do to it. So until next time, see you guys.